Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Rant of Troy Radio, episode 553, coming to you on Wednesday, August 21st. It is the biggest episode of the year, the episode in which we have a 17-page rundown of notes to go through. I'm so excited. I hope you are excited. I hope Alicia is excited. Alicia, you are my co-host here in the Rant Troy studio in Los Angeles, and I've screwed up this rundown, but you know how it goes. Email address, rantoftroy@fanside.com, and our phone number, 818-643-7227, Second Whisper and Show. Yeah, I'm your host, Mike Castillo, and you're Alicia Artola, but I already said that.
You did, but hello, everybody.
Hello. You got some, but before we get going, we want to give a little bit of a shout out to some new threads we got going.
We do. We've got the Travis Matthew USC collection. We were fortunate to get to try out some of these things, and this isn't like paid promotion or anything like that, but I can tell you this stuff is my new favorite sweater and my new favorite sweatpants are Travis Matthew USC ones because they are incredibly soft. So big shout out to Travis Matthew for hooking us up. If you guys are interested, go check out that new collection because they got a lot of really good stuff. That hat Michael's wearing. I've been really impressed with the stuff that we got. So yeah,
it's good stuff. Came in a big box that had the SC logo on it and everything. It
felt a little bit like, how like players, like the NFL players get their little like USC box. Like it felt like a little bit like that, like a little unboxing.
Like we're influencers.
Yeah, are we influencers?
Yeah,
I've got the jacket. I got the T-shirt. I'm not wearing the sweatpants right now because it is too hot, but I can't wait till it gets cold enough for me to just get cozy.
Yeah.
So yeah.
There you go. A lot of stuff going on. You don't have to be cozy to wear the sweatshirt because it's warm outside because it's the summer, and Alicia, that's the perfect time for us to have our preseason tailgate picnic. It's going to be this Sunday at Woodley Park in Van Nuys, 11 p.m. No,
11
sorry,
a.m.
11 a.m. Don't go
right after dark.
No, 11 a.m. We're going to be there from about 11 to 3. We'll drop the exact location or a pin or whatever in the park. We'll put that on Twitter and on Discord on Sunday morning. But yeah, 11 to 3, we're just going to hang out with the Rotbots. Everyone's favorite other Rotbot, Jesse, will be there. Let's see if we can get Jesse on screen here. Can we get on screen? There she is. There she is for our
There's
YouTube
Miss
listeners.
Jessie.
Yeah, little Jesse will be
having a little nap.
Yeah. She'll be there, and it'll be a grand old time for our preseason tailgate picnic thing. So that's Sunday. This Sunday, August 25th.
11 a.m. to we're going to be hanging out. We'll say 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. drop in. We might end up staying longer. Hit us up on Twitter if you need more information. We'll have hot dogs and burgers and some beer and sodas and chips and just be chilling, having a little pre-football tailgate.
Yeah.
So yeah,
a little pre-football chinwag,
yes.
as the Brits would say. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, because the season, it's new, and dare I say it's in mint condition. And you could be in mint condition if you join our friends over at Mint Mobile. It's super easy. You can just go to their website, mintmobile.com/Troy, and you'll see that right now all 3-month plans are just $15 a month, including the unlimited plan. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text on the nation's largest 5G network. You can bring your own phone, bring it along, bring your contacts, bring your pictures, your camera roll, the whole bit to Mint Mobile. Find out how easy it is to switch to Mint Mobile and get 3 months premium wireless service for $15 a month. To get this new offer for your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/Troy. That's mintmobile.com/Troy. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month. Where, Alicia?
mintmobile.com/Troy.
Yeah, $45. Upfront payment is required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers in the first 3-month plan only. Slower speeds above 40 gigs on the unlimited plan. Additional Taxes and fees and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. Alicia, are you ready?
I am so ready.
Are you ready to get into it? Are you guys ready in the chats? Everybody in the chat who's watching us live on the YouTube, if you're listening to us wherever you may be on Apple Podcasts, let's begin, shall we? Let's start game 1, week 1, USC and LSU in Las Vegas, 4:30 p.m. on Sunday, September 1st. The Trojans meet a familiar face, Brian Kelly. It's his third season, just like it's Lincoln Riley's third season with the Tigers. They are the preseason AP poll number 13 ranked team. But this is a whole different new look LSU Tigers than the one that you saw a year ago, maybe. Jaden Daniels, the Heisman Trophy winner, gone to the NFL. Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas, Mason Smith, Jordan Jefferson, Mekhi Wingo. All of those guys drafted in the NFL. New quarterback, Grant Nussmeier. He is going to be the new guy throwing the ball around for the LSU Tigers. They bring back a couple of all SEC candidates on the offensive line, including Will Campbell, who was all SEC first team last year. A lot of stuff to look at this LSU team and say there's pieces there, but they have to break in an all new defensive line, all new receiving core for the most part, and new quarterback.
Yeah, this is tough because I think that an LSU podcast is sitting looking at USC with a lot of the same question marks. There's so many gaps to fill, and it's difficult in the offseason to know how these teams are going to fill them,
right?
Because there's so many unknowns, particularly at quarterback for both of them. I think there's a lot to like at quarterback for both USC and LSU, but objectively, neither of these quarterbacks are Heisman Trophy winners. Objectively, neither of these quarterbacks have the skill set that Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels brought to the table. So it makes for a very up in the air matchup.
Mm-hmm.
My concern with this matchup is the offensive lines. LSU has very, very good tackles. I think that USC has potential on the edges, but no surefire things with Jamil Muhammad and Anthony Lucas and the depth that's there. So
yeah,
I worry about USC's ability to get pressure on Garrett Nussmeier and make the young starter, the unseasoned quarterback uncomfortable in this game. The good news is the USC does have what I think is an upgraded secondary, so hopefully they're able to take advantage. But for my money, when you're dealing with a not a seasoned starter and you can't necessarily get pressure on them, it usually doesn't go well for you. So I'm slightly concerned about this game. I think that both defenses will be improved from last season. But I worry that LSU has an edge in the trenches, and we know how important the trenches are.
Yeah. LA Fred in the chat says that LSU returns 4 of the 5 starters on the offensive line. And yeah, Will Campbell and Will Campbell, there we go, and Emory Jones are those 2 big guys on the edges to keep in mind. But yeah, they lose the receivers. They bring in Xavier Thomas from Mississippi State. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, Garrett Nussmeier, 219 career pass attempts. A little bit more than Miller Moss, but not by much. So we'll see how all that comes to be. It's week 1. Obviously, we'll get into the week 1 matchup more next week as we preview that game. Alicia, how do you have it going? Let's bring up our little cards and flip them. What do you got week 1?
Oh,
wow.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I originally have been going through this thinking that I would pick USC to win. The more I thought about it, the more I tried to resist the overly optimistic Alicia that just always sees a 10-2 record on every USC schedule. And I sort of did some soul searching and decided that the trenches, the issues in the trenches, uncertainty in the trenches that USC has compared to a bit more certainty in the trenches for LSU is what does it for me.
Yeah. You predict the loss. I predict the win. We need to remember to say those for our friends listening. audio only and whatnot. But
Eric in the chat says, "Boo, Alicia." Dave says, "No, Alicia. Yeah, throw all the tomatoes that you want at me. It's possible I'm doing a little bit of reverse psychology picking with this particular one, but I wish I could say I was doing just full blown reverse psychology on USC in this, but I'm not. So,
yeah, it happens. It happens.
As I always say, no one will be happier if I'm wrong than I am.
Here's my case for why I think SC wins in week 1. LSU's got to break in all new skill players, new quarterback, new defensive line. And I think for SC, there's a million question marks, just like there's a million question marks for LSU. And you could say the same thing about SC. I get it. But I think that this is the perfect time to face LSU is in week 1. You look at Brian Kelly in those neutral site games against Florida State the last 2 years, and the team wasn't firing on all cylinders last year. That was with Jaden Daniels back as the quarterback for year 2 at Camping World in Orlando, the second worst yards per play of their entire season. The only game all year they had two turnovers. No other game all season long did they have multiple turnovers. They did it last year, week 1 against Florida State. The worst third down rate of the season at 30%. 2 turnovers the year before. Like, LSU plays sloppy in week 1. Everybody plays sloppy in week 1. I think this is the time to get them if you're SC, so you can sort of work your way into it. I think 2 flawed teams that have a lot to prove. Give me the Trojans in this one. Maybe it's crazy, but
I don't think it's crazy. I think this is very much a toss-up in a way that I think a lot of people might have looked at it before and thought it wasn't a toss-up. It's a toss-up to me.
Yeah. We'll see how it goes. Fighting on MC in the chat says SC 24-21 winners.
Randy has USC 31-23.
Yeah. We'll see how it goes. It should be close. Absolutely should be close. We got a couple before we move on. We got a couple of super chats. Big cheers to Alex and Fighting on MC. Fighting on MC says I can't wait to fight on in 2024. And Alex said ready, Freddie, for the predictions. So let's go on to week 2 as USC is 1-0 for me, 0-1 for you. Let's get into week 2. The Trojans facing Utah State at home, 6 days rest. September 7th, Saturday, it's a night game, Utah State. This is an interesting matchup for me.
Is it though?
Okay. Let me put it this way. I find Utah State interesting because they just fired Blake Anderson a month ago.
Mm-hmm.
Nate Drilling is the interim head coach, 33 years old. Younger than us.
Younger than us.
He was the New Mexico State defensive coordinator the last 2 seasons. Formerly a Pittsburgh State Gorilla. Best name in all of college football.
The Gorillas.
Yeah, it's like D3 or whatever it is. Utah State was not good last year. 108th in FEI. They were 6-7 were the Aggies. Last time they faced the Trojans won big 45-7. In 2016, rebounding after SC, of course, got jiggled back by Alabama. Familiar name for the Utah State Aggies, Spencer Petras. Might remember him. He is the former 3-year starter at quarterback for Iowa. 37 games played over 5 seasons, including 2.5 of that being a starter. 24 career TDs, 19 picks in those 5 seasons. The career passer rating of a $114.7. They do bring back first team All Mountain West wide receiver Jalen Royals to help him out. But this is the team with a bunch of transfers in and out, just like a lot of G5 teams. Alicia, what do you got?
I'm sorry, Utah State, but Spencer Petras is not the quarterback transfer in that strikes fear into my heart. I will give him the grace of knowing that Iowa's offense could not have just been Spencer Petras. The problems with Iowa's offense go much deeper than that.
Sure,
but still, there was nothing about him that really struck me as this is somebody USC needs to worry about. This is, to me, your typical USC playing a G5 that is that is outmatched, and this should not be close.
Let's make our predictions. You and I both
Shocker,
say
2
W's, 2 wins. I think this is a game that SC wins. Orcliffe in the chat says, isn't Bryson Barnes at Utah State now? Is he at Utah State? I was doing all the research that I saw was about Petrus. The Deseret News, by the way, Dralian said to the Deseret News about Spencer Petrus, he's our number one. I truly believe he is one of the best throwing quarterbacks in the country. And I think in a couple of weeks, you guys will see that and be saying that as well.
That is a great pull, Orcliffe, because yes, Bryson Barnes, the pig farmer himself, is at Utah State. If he was starting, I still wouldn't be worried about this game.
All right, we move on to week 3, USC and Michigan. Game 3. Week 3 is a bye week.
There's a reason we're not doing weeks, because nobody's got time to track the bye week.
Yeah, then the numbers off. We go to game 3, week 4, September 21st. USC at Michigan, the defending national champs in Ann Arbor. USC's first ever Big Ten game, Big Ten road game. Sherrone Moore, the new head coach of the Michigan Wolverines. They won the national championship last year, but Alicia, they lost to everybody. JJ McCarthy gone, Chris Jenkins gone, Mike St. Ristel gone, Junior Colson gone, Blake Corum gone, Roman Wilson, Zach Zinter, AJ Barner, Trevor Keegan, Michael Barrett, Ladarius Henderson, Jalen Harrell, Cornelius Johnson, all of those guys drafted in the NFL. They're all gone. This is a Michigan team that has an interesting quarterback dilemma. It's a battle between Alex Orji and, here's a blast from the past, Jack Tuttle. He's 25. Went from Utah to Indiana, now to Michigan. Was recruited by SC in the 2018 class. He's fighting with Orji to be the quarterback. Orji probably going to be the guy, right?
USC's schedule predictions brought to you by former Utah quarterbacks who are now backups at every school along the way.
No kidding. It's like all the people that Cam Rising beat out. Yeah. Alex Orji, the quarterback who I think everyone's sort of predicting to be the QB1. Interesting little fit here. He's a runner. He had a package in each of his first two seasons, but one career pass attempt. One. With 2 years of experience as a backup and a package guy, it'd be interesting to see how that works out for Michigan. I think they're going to go very conservative on offense. We know that they have Donovan Edwards coming back, 2,300 yards from scrimmage, 18 touchdowns to his name. And Colston Loveland is the tight end that I think can be sort of the anchor for Michigan on offense and defense, all up front, led by Mason Graham and then Will Johnson on the back end as well. Your thoughts going into this one?
Another team that is it feels impossible to evaluate. I think there is a very good chance that Michigan, after last season's us against the world rallying, has a major letdown in 2024.
Yeah.
They have recruited well over the past few years. They've had depth, even though they lost a ton of guys, a ton of really, really important guys. I expect them to take a step back, obviously, from national championship level. It's just a question of how big of a step back is that, and how skilled is Sherrone Moore in rallying the troops when he's the guy. Like he did it for them against Ohio State and in those games that Jim Harbaugh was suspended, but it's kind of easy to do that when Jim Harbaugh is on the practice field all week and just isn't there on Saturday. And in those circumstances, I'm very curious if he's ready for this. I am very uncertain about Alex Orji. Donovan Edwards is a really good running back, and I think their running game is going to be pretty formidable, but there is so much to replace here. If this game wasn't at the Big House, I would be thinking about it slightly differently.
All right, let's do our predictions. 3, 2, 1. We both got L's.
Yeah.
I think for me, I think this is going to be a close game and a respectable one, I think, for the Trojans here. But I think that it's a difficult game. I think having the week off before is very helpful, and I think there's a chance that SC could go in. This is what the week after Michigan plays Texas, right? Is that the week before? I think there's a world in which SC can go in here and give Michigan a hell of a fight, especially since this is a Michigan team that has maybe even more question marks than SC. The severity of those question marks might not be as severe, but I think more question marks when you consider that Michigan's 128th in the country in returning production. They return 36% of their production, and that includes Donovan Edwards, who's literally on the face of the college football game right now.
Yeah,
But it's Ann Arbor. It's a road game.
This is the thing. Oh, and for the record, they play Arkansas State the week before USC, in between Texas and USC. But
fair enough.
Like, that Texas game has the chance to really set a tone for this season, and it could be a tone going one way or the other. Like, if Texas beats them badly at home, are they lost? Are they is the, the chickens have come home to roost, and suddenly all of that bravado is gone? Are people asking questions about Sharon Moore?
Yeah.
If they beat Texas, is everyone, pumping their chest and saying, "Yeah, we got this"? There's so much going on there. I have to remind myself that just because they had a bunch of guys drafted doesn't mean they don't have a bunch of guys who will be drafted reloading up,
right.
Up on
and they've recruited well.
Yeah. And that's sort of why I'm going with a loss, even though I could talk myself into giving USC this win. I don't care for USC's chances here, traveling to the Big House for the first time against a team that is, even though there's a lot of replacements, that still has talent and ability.
Right.
The big wild card here is if Alex Orji is a viable starter for them, and he might be. He's a dynamic player that could give a lot of teams fits with his running ability, but there's also a universe where he is too one-dimensional, and a defense like USC is hoping to field this year could basically turn Michigan into a one-dimensional team and then succeed on that. I have such a hard time with this.
I think that it's interesting because I think Michigan is a lot like a lot of the teams that we're going to talk about today. A lot like, Nebraska and Minnesota and Wisconsin. Like, I think they will end up having to play that style of football where they're going to have to be sort of conservative on offense and beat you with a really strong defense. But the difference is, I think Michigan is probably the best of all of those at doing that. And we know that, Penn State is good at doing that too, right? Like, so many of those teams in the Big Ten play that way. And I think it'll be a good barometer to see where SC is at this point. You have SC starting off 1-2. I have SC at 2-1.
The other thing
at this point is that a bad 1-2 for SC through 3 games?
I don't think it's a bad 1-2. I think USC. I view some of these games as toss-ups, and I think that if USC loses, I expect them to be tough losses. The other thing I want to bring up for Michigan as a huge question mark is the reason they won the national title last year is because their defense was unstoppable. They shut down every offense that they faced, even the really good ones. Ohio State didn't get a lot of love. Washington couldn't do much against them with one of the best quarterbacks in the country. They lose Jesse Minter and bring in Don Wink Martindale. And, this is an NFL coordinator who comes in, hasn't been on the college side of things in 2 decades. Does he work in modern college football? I think there's big question marks. Again, I can talk myself into USC pulling one out here. I just don't want to go there.
Yeah, I think there's a world in which 3 weeks from now, we'll be sitting here and we could hold up one of these W's. But I think right now I'm sitting here leaning towards the card with the nail on it
Yeah.
and holding that up just because I need to see SC prove it first before I said that they're going to go out and beat Michigan.
Yes.
I need to see them to prove it. And I don't necessarily say that they have to beat LSU to prove it. I think that, you know, they have to show in the first 2 weeks that the defense has been better, that they can move the ball against a physical, fronts like LSU will have, all those kind of things. And if they do that in the first 2 weeks, I'm going to think differently about this. But as it seems now, I think it's safe to say that Michigan takes that one for now. We will see. Moving forward, let's go to week 4. SC's first home game against a Big Ten team in Big Ten play. The Wisconsin Badgers, coming off a bye week, are the Badgers. Luke Fickell in year number 2. They were 7-6 last year, 5-4, third in the Big Ten West. One of these teams that we've talked about before, where the Big Ten just has a ton of teams in the top 40, right? They're 35th in the AP poll. If you look at the others receiving votes last season in the FBI ratings, they were 45th. They do return 71% of their production, which is 20th in the country. But the interesting thing is, new quarterback here, Tyler Van Dyke, transfers in from Miami, over 7,000 career passing yards, 54 touchdowns. He won the starting job, beat out Braden Locke. He is going to be the starter for the Badgers at the beginning of the season. And I think it's interesting here because Wisconsin brings back a lot of talent on defense. Jaheim Thomas, Ricardo Hallman, Hunter Wohler back at safety. I think it's an interesting spot. You add in Tackett Curtis. What does Tackett Curtis do, right?
Yeah.
Jaheim Thomas, linebacker from Arkansas, was pretty damn good for the Hogs. And I want to see what he can do sort of in this defense. But it's a defense that Alex Grinch is the co-defensive coordinator. Really just the safeties coach, but co-defensive coordinator probably in title only, I would assume, there. But yeah, what do you see? First Big Ten home game for the Trojans, September 28th against the Badgers.
I like Luke Fickell a lot. I think he's a good head coach. I think that Wisconsin will be a very tough out for most of the teams that they play. I don't know that Tyler Van Dyke is a quarterback that I think elevates them considerably.
Yeah.
I certainly, and with Tackett Curtis, it's just impossible to say. I'm willing to. I'm fine with blaming Alex Grinch for part of Tackett Curtis's lack of development or ability to make plays in that season. But then Tackett Curtis followed him to Wisconsin. So is he going to be developed more?
Well, he's not a safety. So
yeah. So this is a tricky one. This is definitely a tricky one. But USC is coming back home. This is a team that USC will be able to out talent.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, to me, after, I have USC going 1-2 in the first 3 weeks. This is the real test, because I think that obviously if USC beats LSU and Michigan, that'll say a whole lot about USC's aspirations and where the program is. But even if you go 1-2, when you come into Wisconsin, this is the real test, because if you want to stay on track for what we would say is sort of you could have a positive season at 9-3. If you want to stay on track for 9-3, you have to beat Wisconsin. If you lose to Wisconsin, you're now opening the door for us saying, well, if you lose to Wisconsin, you could lose to Minnesota, you could lose to Nebraska, you could lose to Rutgers, and USC can't do that. So this is a tricky one.
We've talked about Penn State and we're going to talk about Penn State in a couple minutes, but Penn State being the chalk team in the Big Ten, right? They beat everyone below them. They don't beat the teams ahead of them, and they go 10-2. And will make the playoff this year because it's an expanded playoff because of that. But I think that if SC had a Penn State type of season this year, That would be great for the Trojans, breaking in a new quarterback, all the changes on defense, right? New conference, tough schedule. If you are able to just be the chalk team, then you've got to go out and beat Wisconsin. And you've got to show that you're better than Wisconsin. So,
and frankly, USC should be in a position where, and it's difficult because so much of our perception of USC is clouded by last season's disappointment. But realistically, in year 3 of the Lincoln Riley project, you should be beating Wisconsin. Even a Wisconsin team that I think could be better than they were last year and could be a very difficult out. You should be beating Wisconsin at home. And if you're not beating Wisconsin at home, we got to have a bigger conversation about where USC is as a program.
All right, predictions. Hold up your card. Flip it. We both got wins.
2 W's. And I would like to point out that the viewers at home might have been watching me doing all sorts of weird, looking around my desk and stuff like that. I would like to point out that my card fell on the ground and I couldn't locate it with my feet. So I even had a little makeshift stand-in card ready before I did one last check.
Look
and I
at
found
you,
it.
Multitasking.
Yeah. So
incredible.
Yeah.
Wait, hold up the real one and the fake one.
This is the real W and this is the fake W.
All right, chat. Which one do we like better, mine or hers? We'll see.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to Game 5, SC's second road game in the Big Ten. It's in Minneapolis. The Trojans go to face PJ Fleck's Golden Gophers. Not ranked in the preseason AP poll. Last year, they were 72nd in FEI, but the preseason FEI has them at 51st. This is a very interesting one because they break in a new quarterback, Max Brosmer from New Hampshire, where he was a 3-year starter, 8,700 career passing yards, 70 TDs, 25 picks. He was the AP second team FCS All-American last year at quarterback. Led the FCS in passing yards per game, second in passing yards as a whole, and touchdowns last year. That's an interesting move. Big upgrade from what they had before. Their last quarterback we'll talk about in a minute because he transferred to Maryland. But Daniel Jackson is back at wide receiver. They bring back a lot of talent on defense. 71% of all of their returning production is back, which is 19th in the country. They lose safety Tyler Nubendorf to the NFL, and they were the least penalized team in all of FBS last year. So this is a PJ Fleck team, probably a year of reckoning for him. This is sort of do or die, the referendum year, whatever you want to call it. Minnesota had a couple good years before the COVID stuff, and then kind of flailed. Like, what are they now? I don't know. We're gonna have to see.
What are they now is a team that added a quarterback that I think could do very well for them, but has a head coach that I do not think wants to be there. I don't think that the PJ Fleck to UCLA rumors came from anywhere but PJ Fleck's agent. And it's pretty clear to me that 7 years into this thing, he hasn't gotten them. He hasn't sort of taken them to the next level. They've sort of just floundered in their same like 9 wins are their ceiling. I think their floor is probably what they were last year at 6 and 7, but I don't think PJ Fleck sees his future in Minnesota. And thus, I do not think this is going to be a stellar season for them. Another one where if USC can't go on the road to Minnesota and beat a team that they will, again, out-talent, a team that doesn't... That I guess the best thing you could say about them is that they, like you said, they're the least penalized. They have a certain amount of discipline, but doesn't really catch your eye in very many other places. We will need to be having conversations.
Yeah, we talk a lot about the Big Ten playing that game with great defense, conservative offense. Minnesota's defense was not great last year. 82nd in FEI. They do bring in Jackson Howard, a 4-star edge, who's from Minnesota, went to LSU, signed for one season, didn't take in Baton Rouge, and he's back in Minnesota for the Gophers. And Tyler Williams, a wide receiver from Georgia, comes in, but I just think there's too many question marks there. Kenny in the chat says, how often does bringing in an FCS quarterback actually work? I think that's a valid question. The only one I can think of is Vernon Adams. Can you think of another one that worked off the top of your head? If you can think of one in the chat, throw up your prediction card. What do you got?
Ready? Flip. W.
W's. 2 W's for us. That puts my SC record at this point is 4-1 through 5. You have the Trojans at 3-2. Going into game 6, October 12th, the day that you really hope nobody is getting married. The ultimate day. Red River. Who else plays on October 12th?
Oh, it's just a nonstop slate of perfect. Let me pull it up so that we get the.
It's loaded. You pull it up, and I'll tell you what SC is doing. Facing James Franklin and the Penn State Nittany Lions. They're 8th in the preseason poll.
Ohio State, Oregon, Ole Miss, LSU,
it's a biggie.
USC, Penn State.
It's a biggie.
Clemson, Wake Forest, Florida, Tennessee, Kansas State, Colorado.
That'll be one. I'll definitely want to tune
no,
into.
but like even the middling games are good games. Let's go. We got
a lot of good
Bama, South Carolina, Texas, Oklahoma, Stanford, Notre Dame. Like it's just wall to wall good games.
Yeah, and the big one for SC is Penn State coming in. They were 8th last year in FEI. They're 8th in the preseason AP poll. 70% returning production, which is 23rd in the country. Drew Aller is back at quarterback. A one-year starter. He's going to be a junior. Last year, these stats are insane. 2,600 yards, 25 touchdowns, only 2 interceptions, but a passer rating of 136.9. That rate, like nobody threw in FBS threw as many passes and as few interceptions as Drew Aller.
I think that might be like the prototypical quote unquote good Big Ten quarterback stats.
But a 136.9 just screams to you how like
it's
inefficient
Kenny Pickett.
Inefficient that the offense can be, which is why ultimately they fired the last offensive coordinator. They bring in a new offensive coordinator, which is Andy Kotelnicki. Mike Urich was fired after the Michigan game last year. Kotelnicki comes in from Kansas. He sort of followed Lance Leopold all the way back from Wisconsin Whitewater to Buffalo, then over to Kansas. Kansas last year, 8th in offensive FEI. That's perfect to go to Penn State, who's like 8th in everything else, right? So we'll see if he can sort of improve the offense, because Penn State's offense last year was 18th in FEI. It's not like they were bad. They were just very bland. And Drew Aller's like yards per attempt, low. He's got to sort of get better there. But Nick Singleton, game breaker, back 752 yards last year. Creighton Allen is back in the backfield as a running back too. I'm interested to see what they do with Bo Prabula. He's sort of a package backup quarterback. 329 rushing yards as a redshirt freshman last year as a package guy, which tells you how much they sort of love that package, even though a lot of that stuff came in garbage time as well. Tyler Warren, maybe the best tight end in the Big Ten. Him and Loveland from Michigan will be fighting for that, the top receiving threat for Penn State. But they did lose a bunch of guys on the defensive line. Chop Robinson, Adiza Isaac is gone on that defensive line. They lost their top receiver, Keandre Lambert-Smith. He led all of Penn State last year with 673 yards and 4 TDs. He's now suiting up for Auburn. He was the only wide receiver who had more than 22 catches last year, which that's why you fire your offensive coordinator, right? So It's weird. I think that this is going to be an interesting Penn State team to see how they go, but their game plan is simple: a stifling defense, protect the ball, and you win a ton of games that way. They were first in FBS in fewest first downs allowed, first in rush defense, second in turnover margin, third in turnovers lost, third in scoring defense. You can be average on offense if that's the kind of defense that you have backing you up. And they do lose Manny Diaz, who's the defensive coordinator last year. Tom Allen comes in, former Indiana coach. So it's a lot of stuff thrown at you. But where do you stand on SC and Penn State?
If there is one James Franklin doubter, it's me. If there are no James Franklin doubters, I'm dead. I doubt James Franklin. This is just the big fact. I doubt him in the sense that, like, I do not think that he is capable of getting Penn State over the hump. He's a decent head coach who's capable of winning the games that he should and losing the games that he should.
Yeah.
He's very chalk in that
Very
sense.
chalk, yeah.
My confidence in picking in looking at this matchup is that Penn State's defense last couple of years was the thing to really fear. If USC was playing last year's Penn State defense, I think I would be looking at it and thinking this might be one of those defenses that's capable of stifling USC's offense, Lincoln Riley's offense. But this isn't the same defense. No offense to Tom Allen, who is a good defensive coach, but I don't think he's Manny Diaz. And he certainly doesn't have somebody like Chop Robinson available to him. He doesn't have
great name, by the way.
Great name. They lost a lot of guys in the secondary too on that front. I think this defense, while still probably good, will not be elite the way that it was in the previous iteration. And there's nothing about this offense that scares me. I think they needed to change the offensive coordinator, but we also don't know what Colt Nicky is. He's sort of we're going to talk a little bit about Eric Bieniemy down the line when we get to UCLA, but he's kind of one of those guys who he's been with Lance Leopold the whole way. We don't know what he looks like as an offensive coordinator when he's has full control. Lance Leopold is an offensive coach who will have had that kind of input and contributed to anything that Kansas did offensively. Was, I think, you give to Lance Leopold more than anybody else. So I'm skeptical of James Franklin's ability to go on the road and play a team that has more talent than his team. Mm-hmm. And I think that USC should be in a position to be another one of those ranked teams on the road.
All right, let's hold up our cards. We both say win.
We got wins.
We both say win. I say win because, and Kenny put it in the chat, pull up the record about James Franklin's record against top 10 teams. I have his record against ranked teams on the road, 2-13. And I think that it's a little unfair because we've talked about it before that Penn State is chalk. That doesn't mean that they're bad. It doesn't mean that they're overrated. It means that they're chalk. And there's no shame in being chalk. The teams that they've lost to usually are teams in the top 5 named Ohio State and Michigan. Everybody loses to Ohio State and Michigan. So like that, there's not much shame in that sense. But when you look at it, I think that this is a game that I think is sort of ripe for SC to win and SC to put everything together. And if the defense is truly improved by the Trojans, especially mid-season, I don't think that Penn State's offense is scary enough as it stands now. If Kotelnicki gets there and the scheme improves dramatically and they're able to add misdirection, more sort of like RPOs. The Kansas playbook in College Football 25 is awesome because there's like 1 million RPOs in there. If that's truly the Kotelnicki offense, maybe they get better, and maybe that'll be something we change. But as it stands now, I'm saying win on this one in a close, 24-21 type of way.
I think this is a game where USC has a big opportunity to get a win that is resume building, because I think LSU will have a good, Penn State will have a good record.
Mhm.
That is sort of proof of concept for USC. But I think this is a win.
Yeah, so halfway through the season, I have the Trojans at 5-1. You have them at 4-2. 3 wins on the bounce for you after that 1-2 start. So let's move along to the next game. It is Maryland on the road at Maryland. This is an interesting one. Saturday, October 19th at Maryland. Mike Loxley in his 6th season. They lost a ton of talent. They're 110th in the country in returning production. Only 45% of their production is back. I'm curious what the quarterback situation ends up being. They got MJ Morris, a transfer in from NC State. He started 4 games for the Wolfpack last year, 3 games the year before, 719 passing yards, 7 touchdowns, 5 picks in his career. And then there's Billy Edwards Jr., who's sort of been the backup. He was the backup to Talia Tagovailoa, who is gone and off to the NFL. Well, Billy Edwards last year, not much experience, only 45 career pass attempts, but they bring back 2 great receivers in Ty Felton and Caden Prather. On defense, it all goes through Hippolyte, Ruben
Great
Hippolyte.
last name.
Great last name at linebacker. But they lost a ton of dudes. Corey Dyches is off to Cal. Deshaun Barham is their star linebacker is now at Michigan, and a couple of big guys over to Auburn, including linebacker Fonaje Gote. There you go.
Nice.
Sort of pass heavy offense from the Terps. But near giant killers, but not so much. They led Ohio State 17-10 in the third quarter last year and then gave up 27 straight points. They lost to Michigan by 7. So they play the talented teams very tough. They are hard beat. This game is in College Park. What do you got?
Yeah, the departures on defense are a big issue, especially because they lose Talia Tagovailoa, who really gave them the opportunity to go pass heavy. I feel less confident about Billy Edwards and certainly MJ Morris in terms of being able to pull that imbalance off again.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, realistically, the thing that kept them in those games against those teams that you referenced was their defense keeping the score low and giving them a chance. And I expect the defense to take a step back. I expect this team in general to take a step back. It is a long way to go. The Maryland of it all is definitely in the back of my head here. But I think that the departures that they've had, especially the big defensive departures, losing Barham to Michigan is basically catastrophic.
Yeah.
I think that they are in a position to be less competitive, less giant killer potential this coming season.
Yeah, I say giant killer, but when they haven't gotten any of those wins, it's weird. But
they're that
giant
team,
threatening.
They're that team that is like always playing people tough, and people might not realize it if they're not watching their games because it's 37-17 on the final score. But if you watch the first half, you're like, oh, Maryland's in this.
How many times you're watching a game and it's like Maryland is beating so and so, and the third, it's all the time. Yeah. All right. Flip your card. What do you got?
Oh, shocker. Michael's got the L.
I'm going with a loss here. You're going with the win. Hear me out.
Boo, Michael.
Wow.
Come on, chat.
Here's the thought here. I've looked up and down the roster. Where's the letdown game? You know there's going to be one. There always is. I think it's this. I think it's the week after Penn State. SC beats Penn State, rides high, goes on the road, cross-country game, all the way across country, further than Michigan. And we know that Maryland is a team that is not scared of facing the big teams. They haven't beaten the big teams, so they're not scared of them. They are an offense that loves to get into a shootout, and I think that ends up sort of breeding that sort of, 42-41 type of game or something like that. And more so, it's a difficult part of the schedule. SC's got Rutgers in 6 days after this on short rest, at home. And this one, of anything, just is, I think it's the trap game.
I definitely in a schedule that doesn't have a super obvious trap game, I think you're right to highlight this as a potential slip up, a banana skin, as the Brits would say. Um, but I'm not ready to not ready to go there on this one. I think that
Okay.
there are other potential letdown games that I'd feel more comfortable saying that USC is in true danger.
Mhm.
This to me really comes down to whether or not USC travels well.
Yeah.
And I think that until we see that this USC team can't handle the road slate in the Big Ten,
Mhm.
I'm not going to assume that that's going to be the case.
That's fair, and I think the biggest argument for SC here is Maryland last year in rushing was 114th. And I think one of the ways to beat SC, yeah, you can get into a throwing match and it ends up being, one of those Oklahoma Texas Tech games of yesteryear. And Lincoln Riley, we know, will gladly take one of those. But I think one of the ways to beat SC is to run, and I don't know if Maryland will be able to truly run, which SC I think will enjoy, because if you can make them one dimensional, the foundation is there for SC to be able to certainly win this. This is a game where if it was at home, I'd be throwing up the W card. It's the
I
it's the road aspect.
I
It's
will say
the
there's
schedule, how it all lays out and all that.
for whatever reason, and I can't necessarily explain this, like Maryland gives me Boston College vibes.
Yeah,
So still
yeah,
picking the win.
yeah. Uh, what isn't what's Boston College is in Alumni Park? Is that right? It's
Sounds
in Boston, but it's like
right.
alumni something. But I want to say it's Alumni Park, and
Chestnut Hill.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, maybe it's Alumni Stadium. I don't know.
Yeah.
All right, moving on. See, we need an ACC minute if SC ever joins the ACC. All right, let's move on to Game 8, USC and Rutgers on a Friday night at the Coliseum, October 25th. Greg Schiano and the Rutgers going into year number 15 in total. This is his second stint in Piscataway. Not ranked in the preseason AP poll. They were pretty good last year, 49th in the FEI. Pretty good for what you would expect from Rutgers, especially in this sort of rebuild after Schiano's gotten there and started his second tenure. 7-6, 3-6 in the Big Ten East. And I don't think that schedule, that record truly says how good they were. 74% returning production, which is 8th in the country. They bring back the Big Ten's number one running back, Kyle Monagai, who was the only rusher in the Big Ten who had 1,000 yards last year. Weird fact, I have never seen a running back who is so one-dimensional. He had 8 catches all of last season, including a 6-game span in the middle of the season in which he caught the ball 0 times but ran 110. Isn't that nuts? Like that's crazy in this day and age, right? Like
Yep.
that's like, Ronald Jones's like wet dream of a season right there. The interesting aspect here for the Scarlet Knights on offense is Demir Miller. He was a unanimous 2023 FCS First Team All-American, Walter Payton Award finalist, 166 career catches in his first 3 seasons at Monmouth. He had a school record 333 yards on 11 catches against New Hampshire. That is insane. But at quarterback, in comes Ethan Kaliak-Manis. And I said that he was at Maryland earlier. I lied.
Minnesota.
It's Rutgers. He transfers in from Minnesota, where he started 17 games. with a touchdown to interceptions ratio of 17-13 and an atrocious passer rating of a $115.2. He's a capable but not prolific runner. This seems to be a step down. They lost quarterback Gavin Wimsatt to Kentucky. The pieces are there, not the quarterback. They bring back a lot of pieces on defense too. Mohamed Toure leading the Scarlet Knights on defense at linebacker, and two of the best names in all of college football at the corner spots, Robert Longerbeam and Flip Dixon.
Flip Dixon
Yeah.
is outstanding, but Flip Dixon should be a baseball player.
Flip Dixon could be a baseball player, yeah. Or it could be a Tony Hawk move.
Yes,
Flip Dixon. Bro, he just pulled out the Flip Dixon. Did you see that? He landed it.
Yeah.
Anyways, the other thing to note: this game kicking off at 11 p.m. Eastern in Los Angeles, a Friday night after Rutgers host UCLA. So both these teams are on short rest, and Rutgers has to travel the length of the country and play at 11 p.m. So
if you had told me that USC was facing Rutgers on short rest Friday night, a Greg Schiano team, I think that Greg Schiano,
I would be holding up the L card so quickly.
I think Greg Schiano's a really good head coach.
Yeah.
I think that Rutgers, this would feel like a trap game with Washington coming up. I would say a lot of scary things about this matchup.
Mm-hmm.
But it's at 11 p.m. Eastern time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sorry, Rutgers, but that sucks. Everyone was worried about like USC getting screwed over with time situations with the Big Ten, and that's still certainly possible because a 9 a.m. game could be a possibility as the season goes on, as
Sure.
those games get locked in. But a 9 a.m. game is certainly a better proposition for USC than an 11 p.m. kickoff for Rutgers when they have to travel literally across the country to get there.
Is 9 a.m. better? I don't know that it's better. The only factor that I think makes it 9 a.m. better is that SC practices in the morning now.
That's the thing. And technically during the season they practice in the afternoon. But the point is that USC practices at times in the morning. Like USC practicing in the morning is a normal thing. Rutgers never practices at 11 p.m. Never. There's no context in which they'd be practicing at that time.
Right. Yeah. All right. Let's hold up your cards. I think we are going the same direction. Flip it.
That's a W.
2 W's. Yeah. If the Maryland and the Rutgers games were flipped, I would flip the things. I think that I think Rutgers is a scarier team than Maryland is, but the travel aspect and all the time, all of that stuff, I think absolutely bodes well in SC's favor. So through 8 games, we have SC at 6-2, each of us. Let's go to Week 10, Game 9. It's SC and Washington. Look at that. A familiar face. Who are now coached by another familiar face, Jed Fish. His first season.
Good luck here.
This might take 10 minutes. All right. Okay. So last year, as you know, Washington made it to the national championship game. They lost. Michael Penix was their great quarterback. He moves on to the NFL. The Huskies, coached by Kalen DeBoer, were the only team in the history of the Pac-12 to go 9-0, win every single game. Happened to the very last season. They went to the national championship game and lose. And then they proceeded to lose their coach and literally everybody.
And that's not an exaggeration. That's literally
30 transfers out. And that doesn't include a list of I think I don't have the exact number off the top. They're all listed here. 1 billion draftees. But I looked it up. Of the 22 players that started for the Huskies last November, which was the first week of November. SC plays them the first week of November this year. It's almost exactly 365 days, like 366 or whatever it is, right? There's only, of those 22 players, there's only 3 Huskies that are still there. 3.
Yeah.
None of them on offense. Romo Dunze, he's a Bear. Jalen Polk in the NFL. Jeremy Bernard transferred to Alabama. Troy Fontano is in the NFL. Dylan Johnson is in the NFL. Nate Kalepo is at Ole Miss. Parker Brailsford at Alabama. Roger Rosengarten in the NFL. Julius Bulow in Ole Miss. Delvin Culp, the NFL. Michael Penix, the NFL. Like, that's the offense. None of them are back. None of them. You go to returning production, they are 36% returning production, 130th in the country. I don't know what to make of this team, but now let's talk about the other side. They had 28 transfers in. 10 of those were from Arizona that followed Jed Fish, but he could not bring Noah Fafita. He could not bring T-Mac at wide receiver. Those 2 guys would have absolutely jump-started this Washington rebuild, but he didn't bring those guys. Instead, he gets Will Rogers, the transfer at quarterback from Mississippi State. 12,000 career yards, 94 career touchdowns, 24 picks, quarterback rating over his career of $138. Interesting fit because he was in the air raid, Mike Leach's air raid over at Mississippi State. Here he comes into a system that has a lot of air raid tendencies in the passing game, certainly. But Will Rogers sort of regressed the last 2 years. He was awesome as a sophomore, threw for almost 5,000 yards, 36 touchdowns, and 9 picks, but that was 3 years ago now. I don't know what to sort of make of that. The other players that they bring in that I think are interesting are on the offensive line. Enoch Vimahi from Ohio State. Drew Azzopardi from San Diego State. Jemiah Hunter at wide receiver from Cal. There's guys here. There's absolutely dudes here, and we know that Jed Fish is a really good coach. I just have no idea what to expect this Washington team to look like. You could tell me that they're going to be 9-3 or 3-9 this year, and I would just nod and say,
Absolutely. And that's, again, like, I think of all of the teams that we've talked about being like, it's hard to figure out these guys, these are the number one. This is a completely new team with a lot of transfers in that are like, we can't even necessarily project upon them because so many of them are just sort of unknown quantities. Will Rogers is capable of being a good quarterback.
yeah.
Is he going to be able to operate a system that he comes into fresh with an offensive line that's literally never played together? We've talked to Hithloday over at the Quack 12 podcast has his theory that you can maybe withstand one transfer offensive lineman and insert them and have things be okay. But
they have 4.
The more transfer offensive linemen you have, the worse things go for you because there's just too much that the offensive line has to figure out and put together and have an understanding each individual, but then also as a unit. Like, there's so much that goes on with the offensive line, and they are literally doing like that transition on steroids. It's a completely I'm not saying mercenary in a negative way because I just don't think that's the case, but like, it's a mercenary offensive line where they have to figure out, like, each individual one has to figure out how to gel with the guy next to him all at the same time. There's no anchor there. It's all just.
Yeah. You look at the projected starters over at Our Lads, great resource, by the way. 2 of those guys are transfers not at this level. Maximus McCree, JUCO guy, and D'Angelo Titali from Portland State. So question marks there. I don't know. I think that it's very interesting because we saw SC 2 years ago have a similar team that was completely rebuilt with the new head coach, and SC went 11-1 in the regular season. But I think the difference, as you pointed out, was that SC had a veteran offensive line that year, led by Andrew Voorhees and Brett Nealon and all those guys. This Washington team has to rebuild the line in addition to losing everybody else. And I think if there was a veteran line leading the way, I'd feel better about Washington. But I don't know.
Like you said, I think there's a universe where Jed Fish does a national coach of the year level job with Washington and makes them competitive.
Well, you can make an argument. You can make an argument that the talent they have is not that much different than what he's had at Arizona.
Yes, but that's the other thing is I think that I respect Jed Fish a lot, but even at Arizona, he needed he
minus a T-Mac. Yeah.
Well, he doesn't have Vita and he doesn't have T-Mac, that's for sure. But he needed time to sort of get that team into a place where they could be competitive, and he's not going to have that time to do that with this Washington team this year.
Yeah,
it's a really, really tough thing. But I guess the thing that Washington has is the element of surprise. Brennan Carroll is the offensive coordinator, and Bill Belichick's son is the defensive coordinator, and he's never been a defensive coordinator before. Who knows what he's going to throw into the table? I think there's a lot of unknowns, and unknowns aren't necessarily a bad thing in college football. They can be something that throws everybody for a loop. But in this case, there are too many unknowns. There's too much transition. There's too much uncertainty.
Right.
You can't bet on Washington needs 75% of their unknowns to turn out positive at a minimum to have a decent competitive season.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't ever put more than 50% unknowns being something that you can count on turning out all right for you.
Yeah. I feel like SC has a ton of unknowns going into the season, right?
And SC looks stable as hell compared to Washington.
Comparison. Yeah, in comparison. All right, hold up your card. What do you got? Couple of
W4 victory.
Yeah. So that puts each of us predicting that SC will be 7-2.
Number one reason I would have picked USC to lose that game is simply because we are going, and when we have traveled for games,
it hasn't
always done super well.
No. I think the realistic argument for why SC could lose this game, tough place to play, Husky Stadium.
Yeah.
It's also November. We say that we don't know what Washington's going to be. By November, they might know what they are. And
Jed Fish's Arizona.
That first season, they were 1-10 and 1-11. Remember, they played everybody very tough.
And last year, Jed Fish took USC to the limit. I mean, it was literally Caleb Williams being Superman that got USC over the hump there. And Johnny Nansen isn't his defensive coordinator, but Jed Fish is familiar with USC at least. So I don't know. They're hard to gauge.
Yeah. Let's move on to game number 10. It's Nebraska. Nebraska coming to the Coliseum for the first time since 2006. First time SC will face them in 10 years since the 2014 Holiday Bowl. Matt Rule is in season number 2. They're not in the preseason AP poll. They were 59th in FEI last year, going 5-7, 3-6, 6th in the Big Ten West. But they return 77% of their production, 3rd in the country. But I want to put a little asterisk about that, because not only do they return 77% of their production, which is 3rd in the country, they lose literally nobody. They don't lose. They had 2 transfers of any guys who started a game last year, and both of those guys were quarterbacks who were really backups by the end of the season in Chuba Purdy and Jeff Sims. And
that was Nebraska's main problem last season is,
quarterback play.
But quarterback play was certainly a big part of their inability to win in winning positions.
Right.
But quarterback play was a huge part of that. They didn't have a quarterback, and that changes this year.
Yeah, it changes this year. In comes true freshman and starter Dylan Raiola, the Patrick Mahomes cosplay guy. He's wearing number 15 for the Huskers, replacing Heinrich Harburg. who ended up starting all the other games that Purdy and Sims didn't start last year for the Huskers. Raiola, 5-star quarterback, ranked as number 2 as a quarterback in the 24/7 Sports Composite, 7th nationally overall. And in comes a couple of very interesting receivers for him to throw the ball to. Jamal Banks from Wake Forest. He led all of the Demon Deacons in receiving, 59 catches, 653 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Then there's Isaiah Nair from Texas. Interesting dude. Went to Wyoming, had a great season early on in his career at Wyoming, 44 catches, 878 yards, 12 touchdowns in Laramie for the Cowboys in 2021. But missed all of 22 with an injury. Played 1 game for Texas last year. Here he is in Nebraska. What are you getting? I have no idea. But you add another weapon for Raiola to throw to. I think it's sort of interesting. They bring in a transfer from Florida, Micah Meskua, on the offensive line. I think that's going to be an interesting fit for them. And they bring back all of their defensive line, Jamari Butler, Nash Huntmacher, and Ty Robinson, of a defensive line that was pretty damn good last year. I think that the problem for Nebraska last year was they went 5-7 because, Alicia, these were their losses, or at least 5 of the losses. They lost by 3 to Minnesota. They lost by 3 to Michigan State. They lost by 3 to Maryland. They lost in overtime by 7 at Wisconsin. They lost by 3 to Iowa. They had a solid defense last year, but turnovers is why you end up losing all those close games. They ranked 129th in turnover margin. They lost 15 fumbles. 15.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of fumbles. I don't know what to make of Nebraska going forward, because I think all the signs are there for them to start turning around those close games. They remind me an awful lot of 2015 Colorado.
Boom. Yep.
Remember when 2015 Colorado,
yes, everybody playing them close, didn't quite get over the hump in those games, but was playing everybody close. Nobody had an easy win.
Yeah.
And then the next year, 2016, they
won the division.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think Nebraska feels a lot like that, because they bring everybody back, and then you drop in a 5-star true freshman quarterback who's going to have growing pains, but he's going to have a completely veteran team around him to sort of lift him up. And then you got Matt Rule, the program builder, the guy who took Temple from 2-6 to 10-4 2 years later, the guy who took Baylor from 1-11 to 11-3 2 years later. Well, it's year 2 at Nebraska. His history says that Nebraska will be better in year 2. They were 5-7 in year 1, which is way better of a starting point than he had at Temple and Baylor. I think this is a team that wins like 8 games.
I'm gonna say my bold prediction from this sort of schedule research that I did. I think Nebraska is 8-1 going into this game.
Wow.
You look at their schedule. They got UTEP, Colorado, Northern Iowa, and Illinois in the first 4 weeks, all at home. They go to Purdue, host Rutgers, go to Indiana, go to Ohio State, host UCLA. I don't necessarily see a ton of losses there. Certainly when the Nebraska of last year, who loses games by 3 points that they should win,
right,
certainly loses a few of those games. But if they close that gap, I think they come in potentially 8-1. And that's pretty crazy to think about when you think about Nebraska. As Kenny in the chat says, possible game day game. I don't know. I don't know what's happening on November 16th to sort of in November. It's hard to get a game day because there tend to be a lot of big matchups. But this is a really intriguing team, and Matt Rule is to me an objectively good college football coach.
Right.
I think he's going to have this team playing better. They return their defensive coordinator for year 2. Tony White did a really good job last season. Familiar name, yes, of course. USC, he was on the.
They have a new cornerback, by the way.
They do, Sierra Wright, right?
Sierra Wright,
yeah. So I think this team is primed to be better than they were last year, if not drastically improved from a record perspective.
Yeah.
Dylan Raiola is a objectively better quarterback than they've had even as a true freshman, just in terms of pure talent, than they've had in ages. Going back a long way. Like this is the school of like Adrian Martinez, who sort of fine. Like see Tanner Lee in 2017, Tommy Armstrong,
It's
Taylor Martinez again. Like
Adrian Martinez showed glimpses, but never ultimately reached where he was.
They haven't had a good quarterback in going back to 2009, which is when CFB stats stops letting me search. So
I mean, you can make the argument that they've never had a good modern
quarterback, and that's what Dylan Raiola is.
Yeah, because I think the best quarterback that Nebraska's had, the best last great quarterback they had was Tim Couch, and Tim Couch played in a completely different world than college football is today. Tim Couch would not work in today's game of football. Frazier would, Tommy Frazier would, Frost would, but not Tim Couch. But yeah.
So having said all of that, last year's record on the road was 1-4. They haven't necessarily traveled well. Dylan Raiola is a freshman quarterback. He will be pretty well seasoned by the time he gets here, but still a freshman. I think that there's some pieces there that I like, but I don't know that as a team I'm ready to sort of sound the alarm bells. I think they will be a much better team than they were the previous year. I think Matt Rhule has them on the right track. But does that mean that I think they should be capable of beating USC at home when this is a USC team that I have as conservatively at 7-2? Again, if you can't beat Nebraska at home in November, then we need to be having conversations.
All right, let's flip our cards. This is a loss for me.
I got the W. Boo this man.
Hear me out. I agree. As it stands now, if SC can't beat 2023 Nebraska at the Coliseum, that's a red flag. I don't know that this is going to be 2023 Nebraska. Mind you, we have to see it. We have to see them actually take this.
Is Dylan Raiola worth 2 touchdowns to them? Because he needs to be in order for this to even be a conversation.
No, I hear you. But I don't know that he needs to be worth that many. I think he needs to be worth a touchdown, and all those losses by one possession start to flip, right? Like all those times you don't fumble 15 times in a season, and all those one possession games start turning pretty quickly.
Right, but that was also against. I'm gonna not to create a debate here because we'll have opportunities to do that when we get to the season. But I think that a lot of those games were against the middle tier teams in the Big Ten. Like they were against the teams that you would expect them to be in close battles with.
Right.
When it came to, playing the better teams on their schedule, they didn't quite have that juice except for
Ohio State. They gave Ohio State a lot of trouble at the Horseshoe. Didn't they?
No, last year they lost to Michigan. You're thinking of the year before, I think.
Okay.
Assuming I'm on Nebraska. They got blown out by Michigan. They didn't really play a difficult schedule. Colorado put up 36 on them.
Right.
They held, Illinois and Northwestern and Purdue and Michigan State and Maryland and Wisconsin and Iowa to low scoring totals, but also Illinois, Northwestern, Purdue, Michigan State, Maryland, Wisconsin, and Iowa are not exactly the kind of teams that you expect to be putting up a ton of points. So I'm with you that Nebraska is going to be a tough out. I think that you can't take them lightly, but there will be ranting on the CarCast if this is a loss for me.
All right. Well, we'll see. You said yourself that this is a team that could be 8-1 going into it.
Yeah.
If SC loses 8 to an 8-1 team on the surface, I don't know if that's overly that's the worst thing in the entire world. But
realistically, these are the games that teams that aren't elite lose.
Right.
I mean, these are the game
road games at teams with SC's talent.
I've seen some people in the chat talking about like how we're treating teams like they're juggernauts, and we're not giving USC credit for getting better as well. Like, I trust me, I'm giving USC credit for being better in a lot of areas. And I don't think all of these teams are going to be as good as the top line potential that we think that some of these teams could be. I mean, half of these teams are going to be worse than we think they are, and half of them are going to be slightly better than we think they are. But like, realistically, if you look back at the last 10 years of USC, this kind of game is the kind of game that USC can lose. And that's the big question that we have for USC is, can they take themselves out of that category of team and be a little bit more like Penn State, where they win the games they ought to win all the time?
Yeah. We'll see. Through 10 games, you have SC at 8-2. I got SC at 7 and 3. Let's go to game 11. It's UCLA, SC and UCLA at the Rose Bowl. Deshaun Foster, first season as the head coach. Chip Kelly, of course, now the offensive coordinator at Ohio State, demoted himself to a coordinator's job just to avoid being at UCLA still. And actually, realistically, to avoid having to recruit, I guess. But
yeah,
UCLA last year, interesting, 29th in FEI, and a lot of that is because of that Danton Lynn defense. But Danton Lynn now wearing Cardinal gold, no longer powder blue and canary. The Trojans, of course, lost to UCLA last year, and the Bruins returned 51% of their production, which is 95th in the country. That doesn't really factor in all the transfers. SC sort of went in and got Kamari Ramsey and John Humphrey from the defense. We know they lost Leatu Latu, their best player. The Murphy brothers are gone. Like, this is an interesting sort of spot for UCLA to be in, because I don't think we know what they are. New offensive coordinator is Eric Bieniemy, and they've promoted their defensive line coach to the defensive coordinator spot. They have a first-time head coach in Deshaun Foster, who's never been a head coach before, never been anything further than a running backs coach. And I like the guy. I think he's personable. I think it was endearing how, he had his big flub at media day, and he sort of owned it and all that stuff. And we've talked about that before. But Ethan Garbers is back, and 1,100 yards last year, 11 touchdowns. Michael J. Sturdivant is back. Jay Toya is back. But beyond that, big shrugs. And yet this is the team that absolutely jiggle-bagged SC. A SC team that looked sort of dour last year in November, with the season completely unraveling. A lot of transfers in, though. Rico Flores from Notre Dame at wide receiver. Ruben, go for it.
Uniche.
There you go. And then Alani Makahele from UNLV. A lot of dudes on defense that are coming in, including Brian Addison from Oregon, a seventh-year senior.
Brian Addison.
Yeah, a guy who's we've heard about for literally decades at this point. So yeah, I don't know what to make of the Bruins. Our friend Jake doesn't know what to make of them either. Big wild card team, but I think not a team that I think a lot of people are expecting a lot from.
Yeah, the difference between this team and, say, like a Washington is that we know what Jedd Fisch can do, and that gives them a certain amount of optimism, I think, about a huge turnover, but at least they have a coach who has built something before. Deshaun Foster being thrown into this situation with zero experience. I mean, he's an underqualified head coach. He's underqualified. He could turn out to be a really good head coach. He could turn out to be somebody that just has it. That's certainly what UCLA is hoping for. But the circumstances that brought him into his position were just really, really bad. And I think they're making, as our friend Jake says, they're making the best of a bad situation. And you have to sort of view everything that you look at UCLA through that lens. They're making the best of a bad situation, and that bad situation is probably going to lead them to be a team that probably isn't in contention for a bowl. Just realistically, that's where this UCLA team is, and if they're not, then if they are a team that is looking at potential bowl eligibility, then by God, Deshaun Foster is coach of the year in every iteration, because
Yeah.
there are so many losses on this. I mean, we talked about how Nebraska could be 8-1 going into that USC game. UCLA, they face LSU, Oregon, they go to Penn State, they go to Rutgers and to Nebraska, they host Iowa, they go to Washington. Like, they might only have a couple wins, optimistically 3 wins going into the USC game, and that may reflect poorly on the effort that they're giving throughout the year, but like, that's the reality of their schedule too. So for me, like, the worry for USC is twofold. Number one, that Ethan Garber's USC has seen how effective Ethan Garber's can be when he's on his day. He's not always on his day, but when he is on his day, he can be a very effective quarterback. So that's sort of an X factor. And then also, if UCLA hadn't done what they did to USC last year, I would be looking at this game as a potential, like, do not overlook this team. This could be a look ahead game that USC just doesn't take the rivalry game seriously enough and gets got. But because of what happened last year, I can't imagine USC falling into that trap. So I feel I feel bad for UCLA. The situation that they're in couldn't be worse going into the Big Ten.
Yeah, have at it, Jake.
Yeah,
cut it up.
I feel bad for UCLA. There's a nice little drop for him.
All right, hold your card up. I think we're both going to grab the same card here.
Yeah, it's a W.
Yeah,
You can't lose this game. I mean, we're going to talk about the next rivalry game next with Notre Dame, and I have different thoughts there, but you cannot lose this game. You cannot. I don't care if UCLA is overachieving on the season. You cannot lose this game to UCLA if you're Lincoln Riley. You just can't.
Through 11 games, you've got the Trojans at 9-2. I've got them at 8-3. Let's get to the last one. Your alma mater, Notre Dame, coming to the Coliseum. Marcus Freeman, crazy that he's already in year 3 for the Irish. Preseason AP poll number 7. Preseason FEI number 6. They ended last year in FEI number 6. Kind of shocking to me that they were that high last year. I thought of Notre Dame last year as a pretty good team. I don't know that I would have called them a great team. Number 6, though, in the FEI, primarily because of their defense. Their defense was pretty damn good last year. They do bring back Howard Cross II, an All-American on the defensive line, a 6-year senior, 7 tackles for loss last year and a couple of sacks. Preseason All-American at corner, Benjamin Morrison is back. Xavier Watts is back, an All-American and 5th-year senior. Getting back All-American level talent for Notre Dame on defense is big. That is absolutely big. But they lose a couple of big names on offense. Joe Alton, Blake Fisher off the offensive line. Estime is gone at running back. We know that they lose 3 different wide receivers: Rico Flores, Tobias Merriweather, and Braylon James to UCLA, Cal, and TCU. And there's a new quarterback in town. It's Riley Leonard is the new transfer. Last time they went to the Wake guy. This time they go to the Duke guy. Riley Leonard from Duke led Duke to a 9-4 record in 2022, 20 TDs. And last year he played just 7 games, 1,100 yards, 3 TDs, 3 interceptions. But he had 352 yards on the ground. Big, capable runner in that sense. Dealt with ankle injuries, eventually had a season-ending injury that way. In our notes, we have gutsy player, but hasn't necessarily been prolific. And I think that kind of feels like, a lot of Notre Dame quarterbacks of late. We'll see what happens with Riley Leonard here. He does have other transfers at wide receiver coming in. Chris Mitchell, who had 1,100 yards at FIU. Bo Collins from Clemson had over 500 yards. So we'll see what this offense ends up being. Either way, that defense looks to be pretty damn good.
Yeah, the defense should be pretty good again this year, and that's going to be a worry for Lincoln Riley because no one shut down USC's defense with a healthy Caleb Williams, a relatively healthy Caleb Williams, quite like Notre Dame did. Notre Dame had him flummoxed, and that's Caleb Williams.
Yeah.
If they do that to this iteration,
NFL Bro 69 on Twitter loved it and can't get enough of it. Yeah.
Yes. So I think that's a tricky spot for USC looking at this matchup because they do return a lot of guys on that defense who were very effective. They lose Isaiah Foskey. That's a big defensive lineman, but they return All-American level talent at pretty much all levels of the defense. And then offensively, I think you can expect them to be much better. I think the reason that you and I had a perception of the 2023 Notre Dame team, despite their high ranking in terms of advanced statistics and all that, is that I always just felt like their offense was underachieving, underperforming.
Yeah.
And I put that firmly at the feet of Gerard Parker, who should have never been their offensive coordinator in the first place. He had nothing. There was nothing dynamic about that offense. Sam Hartman is a much better quarterback than they had him playing, and capable of doing so much more than he did at Notre Dame. And I think that was scheme, that was play calling. So they get rid of Gerard Parker and move on to Mike Denbrock, who was at LSU for the last couple of years. Contributed to a really good LSU offense. He was an OC, but then again, it is Brian Kelly's team. That offense. How much can we attribute to him? So there will be some questions there, but I feel confident that he is a better offensive coordinator than Gerard Parker at the very least.
Yeah,
and that alone is reason to think that this Notre Dame team will pass the eye test a little bit better than they did last year, while potentially staying in that sort of efficiency range. Defensively, it'll if they can be a top 10 defense again, I think they'll be pretty happy, considering how difficult it is to sort of maintain after losing people. But they Athlon has their defensive backs room ranked third nationally, their defensive line ranked ninth nationally. This is a legitimate defense, and that defense will be supported by an offense that is more dynamic, a quarterback that is, like I said, gutsy, if nothing else. The big question for him is how healthy is he after that season-ending toe injury?
Yeah.
How much of pre-injury Riley Leonard is there, and he's not as gifted as a passer as Sam Hartman, but certainly a playmaker, certainly a guy who will go out and make plays that wins games. Added receivers that can give them something more offensively. So this is a tough team. I think this is a team that will be in the college football playoff conversation.
Especially the expanded one. Yeah.
Oh yeah, no doubt. They can't be one of the top 4 seeds, but I think they have a pretty good chance of being one of the higher ranked teams. Given their schedule, it's they get Texas A&M. I think they should beat Texas A&M. They get Florida State, but they host them, so that's maybe more of a toss up. And then USC, the rest of their schedule is, I think, very winnable. So again, this Notre Dame team might be 10-1 coming into this game. And it'll be, even though it is at the Coliseum, I think it's a very, very tough prospect for a USC team that by this stage of the season, maybe we will know a hell of a lot more about this USC team and whether or not they're capable of competing against a Notre Dame. But of all of the teams on USC's schedule, and that includes LSU and Michigan and Penn State, Notre Dame, I think I am most likely to bank on being as good as we think they might be in terms of
More
like
so than
hitting a
Penn State.
ceiling? Well, no, because Penn State's ceiling is they
I-
are what they are.
okay,
Again, the
I
James Franklin
think-
of it all. I am skeptical of Marcus Freeman getting Notre Dame up over the hump because we've seen him field good teams but not great teams, and that's always been the question.
But
for
he's
Notre
going to have
Dame.
that defense ready for sure.
That's my thing. Is I think the
Yeah.
defense will be good, and I think the offense will be improved. And if that's the case, then I think of all of the teams on USC's schedule, the likelihood of Notre Dame punching a ticket to the college football playoff and being, if not a national title contender, then at least one of the handful of teams that's on that brink. I think Notre Dame is the one I would choose of everybody on USC's schedule to be in that category.
See, I think Notre Dame and Penn State are extremely similar. Great defenses, offenses that can be capable, but also don't have to be elite because they've got such great defenses.
Yeah.
But if they take a big step forward, they could be really dangerous. But I think the difference is I just trust Penn State to be 10-2 because they're always 10-2.
Yeah.
And I think Notre Dame is a little more volatile in that way. Let's put up our little prediction cards. Ready? I got to win.
Know.
I got to win, and you got a loss.
Yeah.
I think they're too similar to Penn State. Like I said, I had SC beating Penn State, but the difference here of why I am picking a win for the Trojans over Notre Dame versus anything else is this game's at the Coliseum, and I think that matters. I think when you look at Notre Dame's schedule last year, what they were able to do on the road, they got a big win at NC State's, but they struggled mightily at Louisville. They lost at Clemson, a Clemson team that's not great. We know that when they came to the Coliseum 2 years ago, that not only is Lincoln Riley's best win, but that was a Notre Dame team that looked sort of toothless on offense. So even despite the defense, and SC was able to still beat them and sort of run all over them. Different case scenario, different, Al Golden still here as the defensive coordinator. This will be his third year, but yeah, a lot of All-American talent on defense, but I think this is a win for SC.
It's a rival.
Close.
It's a rivalry game. Rivalry games are always toss-ups. It being at the Coliseum is a great equalizer.
Yeah.
Again, what I'll say is that I have USC going 9-3 on the season.
Yeah.
And
Ditto.
I think it's interesting that you and I, outside of Michigan, have gotten to 9-3 with 2 of the 3 losses being different teams.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that epitomizes the schedule for USC. So many of these games are more toss-ups than maybe we should be comfortable with.
Sure.
But the fact of the matter is that the difference between USC being undefeated and 8-5 or 7-6,
it might be really
is a
small.
bunch of toss-up games.
Yeah.
And that makes for a really interesting sort of off-season perspective that has me sort of in a battle between like the optimistic and pessimistic, because both sides can win on any given day, because I can talk myself into USC beating all these teams. I can talk myself into USC beating Notre Dame for exactly the reason you pointed out, that 2022 game where USC just out-physicaled Notre Dame against the odds of what USC should have been doing. And a Lincoln Riley offense that is at home instead of on the road in difficult conditions.
And it's the end of the season. Miller will also be a full year starter by that point.
Yeah, like there's a lot of reasons why I don't think this is an instant loss. I don't think there are any, and that's, I would have expected going into the season that like I would have had at least one instant loss, and that was going to be Michigan, but
there isn't one.
There isn't a definite loss. The losses that I've chosen are just me, to put it in FPI perspective, sort of the win percentages. Like I think USC has a lot of games where they have a 60% win likelihood, and the Michigan, Notre Dame, and LSU games are more in like the 50% or 48% or whatever.
Yeah. Your losses are LSU, Michigan, Notre Dame. Mine are what is it?
Michigan,
Michigan, Maryland,
Maryland, and Nebraska.
Nebraska. Yeah. And the crazy thing is, going into this assignment, the assignment of us creating a 17-page document of notes and all the research that goes into this, I would not have guessed that I would have had SC sitting here at 3-1 against the big four opponents this season: LSU, Michigan, Penn State, Notre Dame. And I think you can also say that if SC goes 3-1 against those teams, finishing 9-3 is a disappointment, right? Because if you go 3-1 against those big four, then maybe you should go 11-1 because you should beat everybody else, because those are as it stands now the four best teams on SC's schedule. I think for me, like you said, there's a lot of 60% games, and there's not an Oregon or an Ohio State on the schedule where I would say immediately off rip, that's a loss. And that makes SC's schedule this year very volatile, and their potential record can be anything from 7-5 to 12-0
to undefeated. I
mean,
like
the Michigan game, I think is interesting because I see a world in which SC wins that game.
If USC starts the season 3-0, I think the undefeated conversation gets real loud.
Yeah.
But USC could also start the season 3-0, and it's complete.
They started 6-0 and still fell flat on their face last year.
Yeah, well, but that's the thing is, like, USC could start a very impressive 3-0, and it just turns out that LSU and Michigan are just not great football teams, like,
right.
or just sort of medium, and did take steps back from last year, and it doesn't mean a lot. That's the difficulty, and I think that we're going to refer back to the Notre Dame Texas 2016 a lot. 2016 is actually a really interesting year to sort of frame this season around, because USC again can start the season 1-3 or 1-2 and then go on a run, or you can look at it through the lens of that Notre Dame Texas game where a result happens and everyone thinks those teams are going to be something, and it just turns out that both of those teams are just we just misjudged them in the preseason. So this is going to be interesting. And like Kenny said, it could be like in 2016 where the November that we thought was going to be very tough turns out to be not tough at all, because it turns out that Penn State is Penn State and Washington can't do this huge flip, and Notre Dame turns out to be a little bit of a typical Notre Dame good, not great.
Yeah, we will see. We will see, indeed. Yeah, well, that's gonna wrap things up with the predictions. Let's go to some. We got another super chat from Tim in LA. Big ups. Got my McDonald's souvenir cup.
I finished my iced coffee, so I'm switching over to my water.
Nice. There you go. Tim in LA says donating for the Skater Bro impression and the return of Jiggle Bag. Don't forget to include Jesse snacks with the tailgate supplies. Yes, there will be treats. There will be treats for Jesse, who has now moved away from the camera. She's scared of it.
Yep.
Always. Let's go to a comment we got from Cam Life. I'm in the DMV area, Michael. Big fan of you guys. USC has a strong following in the DMV. No worries. A huge USC following when they played Vautech in 2004. SC will be fine. To his brother was a huge loss. Yeah, I think that's totally a absolute good read of it. I think that if the Maryland game was on a neutral site, in the sense of like it's in a silo, team for team, on paper, all those things, I think SC absolutely stacks up well, and I don't doubt that SC is going to travel well in all the games this year, because I think a lot of people, SC's alumni network is worldwide, right? But there's a lot of people on the East Coast. We see it all the time. How many times do we see it? We get comments of people living in the East Coast, and the game's gonna kick off at 10:30. That sucks for me, or whatever. Well, now SC's going closer to you, right? There's a lot of people on the East Coast. I think that's going to have SC traveling well. I still think that like it's difficult for a football team to travel 3,000 miles every couple of weeks. SC doesn't have to do it much this year. They go to Maryland and Michigan and Minnesota, and none of those when it should be cold. So I think that benefits SC there. But those are 3 games that necessarily won't be easy either. But we'll see. Like I said, on paper, I think that SC absolutely should be able to beat Maryland. Ron Murdy says, "Does 9-3 get SC into the playoffs?" What say you?
I think no.
Okay.
I think some years 9-3 will definitely get somebody into the playoff. The problem is that I think that the 3 losses, as I have them, is sort of proof to the college football playoff committee that USC isn't maybe ready for prime time, unless they're like unless 1 or 2 of those losses is in overtime and everybody agrees that it was just one of those days. I was putting together my playoff predictions for fansided.com earlier. I'm not done with it yet, but I basically have my grid or my bracket. And my suspicion is that there will not be a 3-loss team in this year. And that's because I am penciling in Ohio State, Oregon, and Penn State from the Big Ten, Georgia, Texas, and Alabama from the SEC. Notre Dame taking a spot is a big blow to 9-3 hopes. Utah from the Big 12, Kansas State. I think their schedule plays out in a way that they could easily be a 1-loss Big 12 runner-up, which would put them in. There will be probably a team like Liberty from the Group of 5 that has a good enough record to get in as a Group of 5 champion. You just sort of are running out of spots. I ran out of spots when I was putting together my playoff predictions. So it's certainly possible because if there's chaos, if people start losing games and everybody, upsets happen. That's why we love college sports. And those upsets are impossible to predict most of the time. And so it'll be hard to say. But like, I've got Ole Miss out because I think they're going to be 3+ losses. And it's hard to sort of find the teams that will have 3 losses that will be able to get in over like a second place. Like I suppose if Florida State is undefeated and Clemson or the ACC sort of eats itself, then you open up a spot for a 3-loss team. But at that point, USC might not be the one that gets in. It might be someone like Mizzou, who again has a schedule that sort of opens up for them.
I think that Matthew in the chat says not impossible. It always depends on how it plays out. And yes, that's the answer to everything, right? But I think that the how it happens would be some sort of way in which I think you could argue, is it better to of those big 4 opponents, the big 4 scary opponents that SC does have in terms of like brand names, the LSU, Michigan, Penn State, and Notre Dame, is it better to go 3-1 against those, or is it better to go 1-3?
Well, the problem is if you go 3-1 against them,
if you go 3-1, those are a lot of good wins on your resume.
You got to find 2 bad losses, though.
Right.
But then again, that is a good point, though, because the college football playoff is looking less at losses and more at wins.
And, but then the other side of things is like, we are now in super conferences. There's a super conference in the Big Ten and the SEC, which means that schedules are going to be harder, which I think, like I've made the argument before on the pod, like I think that makes the 3-loss playoff team more viable, because we will be able to sit here and say they are proven because they played this tougher schedule. They only have 3 losses because they played 5 top 10 teams, because half of the top 10 is in the SEC and they play an SEC schedule and whatever. Or the same thing about the Big Ten. And there's a world in which if SC goes 9-3 and the 3 losses are to LSU, Michigan, and Penn State or Notre Dame, to 3 of the 4, and the 3 losses are each by a field goal, and those 3 teams are all in the playoff, like
You can certainly
you
make an
you can
argument.
see a world in which they end up getting there. You can also
Yeah.
see the world in which the community says, SC, you had your chance. You played the 3 teams that are all in the playoff and you lost. So
Yeah.
we'll see how it all comes to be. My new soundboard is not working. It is like frozen. It's been bothering me that I haven't been able to hit any buttons all game, which means I got to go to the old soundboard to play a voicemail that we got from Trevor. So it'll do the awkward reach over here. Hold on 1 second.
Hey, Michael and Alicia, Trevor here. Big fan. I've got a question for you guys, mainly because it's very pedantic in nature. And while I consider you guys to be 2 of the best commentators on all things USC football, I also consider you guys to be the foremost experts on the pedantry of USC football. So here's my question. The emojis that Lincoln Riley and Annie Hansen and everyone associated officially with USC football throw up when a new recruit commits, we've all decided apparently to refer to them as the fight on emojis. And I heard you guys last week refer to the legendary Joan in South Bend's picture that she sent you as her throwing up a fight on in front of the Golden Dome. So here's my question. When did the 2-finger victory salute become known as the fight on emoji? I mean, it's the 2 fingers. It's the V for victory. It's the victory salute. What on earth does that have to do with fight on? Why is the 2-finger victory salute now known as the fight on salute and the fight on emoji in USC football? And am I insane for being really worked up about this? Please let me know. Thanks. Love you guys. Bye.
Thanks for the call, Trevor. I think it's a valid question, and I'm trying to think when I had my orientation at SC, and there was a guy who was saying how to do it. You don't want to do it like this. You don't want to do the claw. You don't want like all those things. I can't remember what he called it. Probably called it the V for victory because that's what it is. Absolutely. But I think it gets called to fight on as a shortening of things. It's a little cumbersome to say they threw the V for victory to say fight on because you throw the V for victory coincides with saying the words fight on. If I go like this, you would say, if I wave at you for people listening, you wouldn't say that you might say that I'm waving at you, sure. But like you might just say that I was saying hi. Because the act of doing this is saying hi. And the act of throwing up the V for victory is the act of saying fight on. And so I think it all just sort of blends in together. But yeah, when I was a kid, I think that, yeah, it was absolutely called V for victory. But it was still fight on.
So I think you explained it very well.
Well, hold on. Because I think of Texas A&M. They're the Aggies, right? Their symbol is the thumbs up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like it's gig 'em, right? If you throw up people are like, oh, he gave a thumbs up. Like, no, he gave me the gig 'em, right? Like, wouldn't that be what they said?
Yeah.
Right? I don't know.
I think I'm glad he called this a pedantic discussion because this is definitely in the weeds.
Sure. Yes.
So I'm looking at the media guide right now, and there is no V for victory in the media guide, but they don't actually discuss that symbol as a
Right.
thing. So it's hard for us to sort of refer to the official USC stance on this. But I think you explained it correctly in that this is a V for victory, but like Winston Churchill did a V for victory, and that had nothing to do with USC. So like when you do fight on the fight song, you do this for the viewers, for the podcast listeners. I'm doing the V for Victory like movement for the Fight On fight song, which like I think is another one of those. What's the name of the thing that you that is like a thing to describe an action rather than what it is? I think there's like a name for that, but like
a verb. I don't know.
So it's a fight on symbol because the fight on symbol is the thing that you do when you say fight on, and it differentiates USC like this from just like a peace sign or a V for Victory that anybody could be doing outside of the context of USC. So to me, that's why we say it's the fight on symbol, because there is no better symbol to describe what you mean when you're doing like this. The two fingers in a V formation like is a fight on.
Yeah, Matthew in the chat says, my initial thought is that it's incorrect to call it a fight on sign. However, calling it that gives us more ownership of it. Anyone can throw up a victory sign, but only USC throws up a fight on. Yes, and I think it's also
like
there's a difference between
the University of Virginia does the V for Virginia. So like
right. But there's also the V for Victory and there's a peace sign.
Yeah.
Which are the same thing. And yeah, I think it's the whole context of everything. Kenny says that you say fight on when you hold up the fingers in public. Yeah, that's what it is. I think it's just it's the shortened. You can put that up, and what you're doing is you're saying fight on with one button press instead of 7.
Yes, but like
8 with the space.
So think of it this way: like fight on equals V for Victory. So
yeah,
this is V for Victory.
The emoji, especially, yeah.
But it fight on equals that.
Right.
Where the V for Victory does not equal fight on unless you're calling it fight on.
Okay.
I don't know that helps.
Now I'm just I'm glazing over. I think the listeners are glazing over at this point.
Yeah.
But yeah, let us know what you call it. Is the V for Victory or fight on? Email address rantandfreewighefans.com. Phone number 818-643-7227. It's been like a 2-hour long episode. We got to get out of here. Sunday, 11 to 3, we'll be at Woodley Park in Van Nuys for our preseason tailgate picnic shindig thingamabob. It should be a fun time. We'll, like I said earlier, we'll put up the exact spot of where we are on Twitter and Discord and whatnot. So check us there. Until then, we'll be back next week. Our next week's episode is next Wednesday with the first game preview of the year, previewing USC and LSU, the Trojans and the Tigers. So keep an eye out for that. We will be back then. Until then, we will see ya.
See ya.
See ya.